Most people know Kent Rollins as the cowboy cook from YouTube, but long before the views and the cookbooks, he was feeding cowboys on the trail with little more than a chuck wagon and a well seasoned iron skillet. Today, he has a hit show called Cast Iron Cowboy on the Outdoor Channel, a loyal following of millions, and a mission that hasn't changed, feeding hearty meals to hungry cowboys with food that incorporates the flavors of each ranch's region. Kent's story is proof that honoring where you came from doesn't mean you can't do something new. Let's get into it. Kent, thanks for being here.
It is my pleasure, my friend. My pleasure.
Let's start at the beginning
All right.
because you grew up working cattle along the Red River in southwest Oklahoma. What are some of the memories that help shape who you are and who the viewers see you as today on your show?
Well, it goes back to my mother and my dad both. My dad was a cowboy, a farrier, part-time veterinarian without a license, and we took care of a lot of things. But my mother instilled in me the value of cooking and what that meant. There's always been fire, and fire brought people together at first for light and warmth, and then some poor old caveman said, we could throw it on the fire. I think it would actually be better. She would let me in the kitchen when I was young because sometimes it would be a whole lot warmer in that kitchen when it was 9 degrees outside horseback. So I thought, this is not a bad deal. And then she told me I could wash dishes, and I'm thinking, well, the saddle looked pretty good after that. But I was very fortunate to grow up around a bunch of old timers that were heroes to me. They stood tall as giant oak trees, and they could do more with a grass rope than anything I'd ever seen in my life, from roping underhanded to behind your back to anywhere in the world. And everybody back then was tied on hard and fast, and you had an old horse that you could trust. And my dad always told me when he would leave me sometimes in a branding pen with some of them old men, he'd say, pay attention now, you might learn something today. And there was never a day that went by that I didn't. I wished I would have had a tape recorder when I was little to sort of get some of those old men's feelings back in me every once in a while, because I sort of forget. But they taught me the value of land, what it was to be a steward of the land, to take care of it, cattle and horses, and always praise God for everything you had.
Absolutely. During that, like being raised in agriculture, I think we see the toughness that's out
Yeah.
there, and we get into the monotony of things. And at what point did you first fall in love with cooking? I know your mother kind of brought you through there, but there had to come a point where you got your wings and said, I'm actually pretty good at this and I really enjoy it.
Well, probably about 1983. I'd been riding bulls pretty hard at the time and rodeoing, and had an uncle in southwest New Mexico that lived north of Silver City up there in the Gila Wilderness. And he said, I know you're a pretty good hunter, and I bet you're a pretty good cook because I know your mother is. I need you to come out here and help me guide some hunters, and you can cook. It was sort of like having a chuck wagon, and that's way before I ever thought about being a chuck wagon cook. We just packed it all in on a mule, some
Sure.
21 miles into the middle of the wilderness, and he'd throw out a bunch of Dutch ovens and some skillets, and nobody had ever taught me to bake anything in a Dutch oven. So it was all trial and error, and coming from 1,800-foot elevation to nearly 8,000-foot elevation was a big change, not only on your lungs, but also on the way bread rise and also the way beans cook. And
Mhm.
I remember that first morning I got up about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, went to making biscuits, and put them in a pan thinking I'll give them 2 hours to rise. And 2 hours later, they were still about the same size. And after I cooked them, they still didn't raise up any. And the hunter said, is that flatbread? I said, it is today, brother. I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. But it took me 3 or 4 days, Jonathon, before I sort of remembered a little chemistry from back in high school. You take baking soda and add to baking powder where you're going to get a little more elevation. And I sort of doubled up the yeast in a lot of things and figured it out. And trial and error was always my biggest teacher when I was baking something in a Dutch oven. And you spend 6, 7 weeks out there at a time. You learn from your mistakes, but you never rule out that there's something going to be different tomorrow, because
Sure.
Mother Nature plays a big role in whatever you're trying to cook with an open fire. Whether the wind's blowing 35 mile an hour or it's raining or it's snowing, you learn to get by and just get it done. When I got out of there that second season after that, I thought, I think I might buy a chuck wagon one of these days. I'd eat off some wagons in the past. My
Sure.
dad had told me this: never complain about a cook, no matter how bad it might be, because he'll get even. I ended up buying a chuck wagon, I guess, late in the year of 91. And I started cooking for ranches that next spring in 92. It was something that older people that saw me, old hands, they sort of knew where I come from and they respected me as, hey, this guy I know has been on the other side of that fire. Let's see if
Sure.
he was a cook, And but I learned real quick from an old man named Mac. He had come into breakfast about 2:15 every morning, sit around the fire, and he'd say, "Anybody can fry meat and boil coffee." He said, "Can you make bread and dessert and cakes and pies?" He said, "If you can, I'll call you a cook." Well, them things sort of come to me sort of natural as learning. I guess it was 20 years later after that. I cooked for that old feller for his surprise birthday party, and he come around the corner of the barn that day, didn't know I was there, and he said, "Well, I'll be damned. You finally made a cook. Took you long enough, didn't it?" A good crew on a ranch always worked better with a good cook.
True.
And I made it true to ranchers and let them know, hey, I'm going to feed cowboys like I want to. I'm not going to scrimp on anything
Yep.
because it never looks bad on the cook. I mean, never looks bad on the rancher. It's always the cook's fault. I commenced feeding them in 92 and stayed as busy as I want to. Some ranches were 4 weeks, some of them were 7 weeks.
That's what I was going to ask you. So before you buying the chuck wagon, let's kind of back up a little bit. You were rodeoing,
Yeah.
day working a little bit,
Yep.
just anything in the cowboy world that you could do to make a living. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, but my dad always told me too, if you're going to be a cowboy, you better know how to do about 43 other things or you'll go broke. And
Well, that's where I was headed. I'm
yeah,
glad you brought that up because
because I learned to drive a road grader, a bulldozer, a front end loader. I work on windmills, went to building houses, cabinets, everything in the world in between things.
you bet.
And you done whatever it did to get by. And he had always told me, my dad, do something you love to do it better than anybody else. You'll never have a job. You'll be on vacation the rest of your life. And I've been on vacation forever.
Okay, I was going to ask you that because one of the things that I think a lot of folks struggle with is feeling accomplished. You set out early in life and you just kind of feeling your way through it. You don't know quite where you want to be. You don't know what your bigger purpose is.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you had battled that also, or if everything just natural progression. And if the chuck wagon, whenever you decided to make that investment, was it about money or was it truly a decision made out of passion? You were just going to figure the money part out later.
Well, I remember Mac telling me down there about the last day we was at that ranch. We was sitting there having coffee before everybody woke up, and he looked over there at me. He's sitting on his haunches, leaned over by that fire. And he said, Cookie, would you do this if we wasn't getting paid? And I looked at him and I said, yeah, probably so. But I said, we just like one more day, so let's see what's happening if they pay us anyway. But a cook always made twice what the cowboys did. At
Okay.
that time I was making $40 a day and they was making 20. I tell people that now and they think, how do you survive? And I said, well, you in there 4 weeks. You thought you won the lottery when you come out of there. But there was hard times. There
Sure.
was a wagon is not cheap. Maintaining it's not. Buying all the stuff that you need to go with it. It ain't like you can go to the hardware store or down there to the tire store and get something to fix it. I had to learn to be able to work on a wagon, especially if we was going to pull it with a team and how to handle a team. It's one of them deals to where when it comes from your heart and you really want this in life and you pray about it, if you stick at it long enough, good things will come from it.
Oftentimes, I think if we'll listen, God opens that door. It's just, are we tough enough to step
Yeah,
forward and,
yeah.
you
He's
know, and
got the
take
saddle thrown on there. He's just waiting for you to get on and can you ride it?
That's right. Let's shift gears here. When did you realize that cowboy cooking, like it wasn't just a job, something worth preserving? Because I feel like there's a shift. You were kind of shifting from the day work to where did you shift gears into more of like that preservation of something that was handed down by those old timers? Because there's getting fewer and fewer folks that are holding on to the traditions.
Oh yeah. I was on the Bale Ranch one time. There's a cowboy rode up beside me and he said, look there behind that wagon, Kent. And I said, yeah, it's a big remuda of horses. He said, no, look right down at the ground. What do you see? I said, wagon tracks. He said, there ain't been a wagon pulled out on this ranch since 1957. And he said, we're going to stay in the same camps them old cooks did and all the cowboys did from way back in the 20s and the 30s. He said, we're carrying on a legacy. And I said, every day. I said, we cook with the same methods that he used so many years ago. I just have a whole lot more to work with because I didn't see a whole lot of chuck wagon cooks. I sure didn't see none that were much younger than I was. I seen a lot of, and I don't mean this disrespectful to any of them, but a
You bet.
lot of old men who were bent and broke. You get hurt cowboying, next thing you do, hey, maybe I can make a cook just because I want to be in the environment. But it's a very rough, demanding life, but you have the best view out your kitchen window every day. And you're in places that nobody can dream of and a GPS can't find. You meet some of the grandest people in the world.
There's something to being immersed into agriculture
Oh,
and
yeah.
God's creations. I just think for folks that aren't involved in ranching, farming, like they don't understand it. And it's hard for us to truly explain to them the beauty that's around us.
Oh, yeah. And somebody asked me one time, said, what do y'all talk about? I said, well, the number one thing from when I was little to still now on a ranch was weather.
Yeah.
It was always controlled by weather. Was it going to rain this year? Were we going to grow enough grass? And the next was who got bucked off and how bad was he hurt? We laughed at him, but we don't want him to hurt too bad.
There wasn't a little ego in any of those conversations,
Yeah,
I'll bet.
yeah, there was a little.
So, cowboy culture, what do you think's the one thing that people just misunderstand about cowboy culture?
Well, I think it goes back a ways to where people, when they think cowboy, they've seen too many Westerns on TV. There's a lifestyle out there and a heritage that people are still carrying on today. I did an interview one time with a lady, and she said, your kind of people are fading from America. I said,
Mm.
no, ma'am, you just can't see us from the interstate. I said, we're still out there. I said, as long as there's a cow, there's a lot of country, and there's a cowboy, they're going to be somebody cooking. They tend to realize later that, hey, this is not a movie. This is life.
Yep.
This happens every day. Good, bad, or ugly, dirt storm, tornado, blizzard, it don't make no difference. If they're working in it, I'm cooking in it.
The work's obviously changed. I mean, there's fewer folks that cook and live life this way. How do you feel being that ambassador? Because as you really get to searching for, cowboy cooking, there's a few folks
Yeah.
that are out there, but I mean, you guys are really there's a small band of you that are left, really.
Yeah. And there was always a deal when people say, hey, I need a wagon cook, but can you drive a team too? And I'd say, yeah. Well, I wish it would be a good team. You never know what you're going to get on some of them things.
You bet.
But there's I always looked at it from the history point of view, really, in a way. If I can do what I love to do and share it with millions of people, then I'm carrying on something that some old cook started after the Civil War, driving cattle down the Chisholm Trail or the Goodnight Loving Trail to get beef to someone else. It's a deal that always blows my mind, Jonathan, that I think, well, I've seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
It's different every day. Every ranch is different. It's just a blessing.
And I think too, Kent, I'm sure, in my lifetime, relationships have been everything.
Yeah.
And I think with what you're doing, you're in the relationship business
Yeah.
too, with everybody that you're feeding and the ranches you're working for. I mean, all the way through. I think that would be one of the biggest things. In a sea of sameness, did standing out take you to where you are today?
I don't take any glory or credit for what has become to me. It's all due to God, a lot of hard work, sweat, blood, and ain't no telling how many boxcar loads of firewood. It's something that I didn't know I'd ever reach to at this time when I started in 91, thinking
Sure.
it'll just get to this. I was just happy to have one more day doing something that I loved and seeing different country.
When did you know that it was, hey, I'm all in. I'm all in. It's a passion. We're going to grow this. There's no second option.
I quit a full-time job that had benefits, retirement, insurance, and I liked the job fine as driving a maintainer, working a bunch of country. Every day I thought, this is really not what I want to do. I remember talking to my mother and I said, I think I'm finna quit this. I'm going to buy a wagon. And I'm going to remember what Daddy told me. I'm going to do something I love to do. And she
Yeah.
said, you think you can make it? I said, if your food's good enough, I said, you don't need to advertise. I said, word of mouth and a full belly will get you a long way down the road. It's a thing that I always thought about. I'd be on a ranch, and it's before cell phones. We didn't have none of that. And I'd get home and I'd have an answering machine, and it'd be some ranch, hey, can you cook for us on these dates? And then there was always catering in between. I'd go and cook for 200 people, 400 people, 700 people, people that I knew I could trust that would help me. But ranching is something, when I was feeding cowboys, that I always look forward to. To me, I always got more rest when I was out there. I felt more energized when I got home. Sure, there's things I missed. I remember my mother asking me one time, she said, you was gone nearly 6 weeks. Did you miss me? And I said, yeah, I missed you, Mama. I said, but I missed a stand-up shower, sit-down toilet, and carpet more than that.
Well, during that whole process, when you making that transition, did people think you were crazy?
Oh, yeah. I can remember I would call them, they would call themselves upstanding people of the community.
Sure.
They said, you're a fool for doing this. You have no insurance. You have no retirement now. You ain't going to make it. And I said, ain't was a word we never did use unless Daddy would throw you in the saddle and say, you ain't going to get bucked off. But I said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I said, I'll give God the glory and the credit for it. And if He is thinking this is what I need to do, He'll be by my side every day and we'll make it work.
I think that is one of the biggest things in society why we're losing a lot of entrepreneurs, farmers, ranchers.
Yeah.
Society tells us we need to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And and God tells us it may not be a comfortable ride.
I learned too so many things by mistakes.
Yeah.
Like that don't fit. This ain't gonna work. But if you're never challenged, you never change.
Yeah.
You just get ready. You're just like riding that same old horse that's been on a dude ranch for 50 years and he won't get off the trail and he won't get out of a walk. You get so comfortable in your surroundings that you think, hey, I can't change because I won't make it. So I just always tell people, step out there with faith and you'll go a long way.
I love that. That's what I wanted to, if you were to give somebody the one bit of advice, if they were thinking about stepping out, but they're scared, they're fighting those internal demons on whether or not it's a good thing to do. And I'm glad you said faith was the one thing you would share with them. I
Yeah,
love that.
faith and hard work. My daddy told me, he said there was 3 P's in the family. And I said, black-eyed peas and what? He said, no. He said, perspiration, perseverance, and prosperity.
That is true. You've gone from feeding crews and cow camps to sharing stories and meals with people all over the world. What's that like?
It's, when people started calling and say, hey, we'd like for you to come up here to Connecticut and cook for these grocery stores.
Yeah.
And I'd say, that's right west of Fort Worth, right? And they say, no, me and Shan load the wagon and take off. It's a 2-day drive. It's not one of these deals. And she'd even tell me, she'd say, we don't have to drive this in 2 days. And I'd say, sweetheart, I love you more than anything else. But I said, you'll find out real quick that your bladder and a diesel tank need to be the same size because that's the only time we're stopping. But I've got better through the years now, Jonathan. 8-hour drive is about all I want anyway.
How did, the YouTube channel come to be?
Well, me and Shan was, first year we were on the Bell Ranch out there. And she said, I think I'm going to take this little camcorder and we're just going to record some videos. We had maybe done 1 or 2 videos prior to that just to see what was happening. We didn't know a whole lot about YouTube at the time. She took 3,300 pictures and I don't know how many hours of video while we were out there.
Oh, wow.
And no one ever taught her to film. No one ever taught her to edit. She come from, sure enough, cowboy country up around Elko, Nevada, but she knew nothing about cooking in a Dutch oven, anything like that. She come to cooking school 3 times. Sure. I remember when she kept coming back, I'm thinking I'm going to have to marry her if she's ever going to graduate, And she's a great baker in a Dutch oven. She's a person that's, as Gary Morton once put it, she's prettier than a brand new penny and tougher than boot leather. We'd went out there the second year at the Bell Ranch and they had droughted out. We'd fed cowboys lunch and the wind blowing about 70 miles an hour. And I mean, that old dirt was just eating you up. And I seen her turn her back to it like an old horse in the wind. And looked around there and I could tell she was crying because the dirt was washing off her face. And I said, sugar, you ain't got to be in this. I said, you can go sit in the pickup, turn the air conditioner on, Go to headquarters. Get out of it. She turned around and looked at me and she said, this is what we do. And we do it better than anybody else. She said, if you can't take it, I can handle it by myself. And I said, yes, ma'am, I'll get right to it, sugar. It's a thing that I would tell her on her first ranch. I said, there's no spa days. There's no holidays.
Sure.
You're going to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're going to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, but you learn how to survive. And I said, you meet the greatest people in the world and some of the greatest country you'll ever see. And I said, it never gets old. But just remember, you can't have a plan A, B, C. If you're a wagon cook, you better have X, Y, and Z, because Mother Nature going to bring you something you ain't never seen every trip.
She shot all that video on the Bell Ranch.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Ooh, I'd say 14 years ago, maybe 15.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really kind of before all the social media stuff.
Yeah. We didn't,
firing up, and
we didn't have none of that at the time. But we figured out with YouTube, it's the greatest platform in the world.
Uh-huh.
And I'd done some cooking shows for different people. Then the Food Network hollered at me again, and we did some stuff for them. And I like TV.
Yep.
It was pretty easy to me. I'd always tell people, just be who you are. Don't be something you're not. People can see a fake or a counterfeit 100 miles away. When I got back from one of them deals one time, Shan said, we're fitting to do a lot of cooking videos. I said, suits me. We invested in a different camera. Then we finally figured out an iPhone is better than any camera we ever had in our life. So everything was shot on an iPhone from then on. But I would watch her figure editing out. It's not something that's so easy to do when you just sit in front of a computer and you piece all this together and you got to make it flow. I've worked for a lot of producers, a lot of directors, and been in a lot of TV. But she's the best one I ever worked with.
Did you guys, when that first, kind of the first videos that you guys posted, did you have any idea that it would take off like it did?
No, not really. It probably took about, I'd say 2.5 to 3 years, because we'd make a video and then we might not make one. Then next month we might make one, and we finally sat down one night and Shen said, I really think this is where it's at.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if we're going to do it, I said, it needs to be sort of like a dairy. It has to happen consistently every week. People will learn that, hey, there is a video coming out at 2:30 Central and I'm going to watch it. And next Wednesday, I'm going to watch the next one,
Yep.
So we started doing videos more. We got into Facebook. Wasn't long after that, we got a great book agent and we got our first hardbound cookbook that me and Shan put together ourselves. All the pictures are hers. All the stories are mine. All the recipes are ours. And we wanted it to be sort of like a coffee table cookbook. And that was 2015, called A Taste of Cowboy. Mm-hmm. It is on Amazon as one of the top 100 books you should own in a lifetime. It just sort of snowballed from there. People got to calling saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. But we would get producers that would call and say, hey, I got the perfect show for you. I said, no, you don't. I said, y'all want reality, we want real. I said, we got the perfect show right here where we're at. I said, because we can say, God bless America. We can say, would y'all pray for so-and-so? We had never looked back. We just try to stay in the saddle now and make sure it's on the right track.
I think that's what I really like about what you're doing is, like, your cookbooks are more, like you said, they're more than just a cookbook. It's more than just recipes. There's stories. There's faith. Like, you don't hide any of that. You and Shannon are about as real people as I've come across. And then the other thing that I kind of value is, okay, I work with my wife day and day, and it's always, that can be good and that can be bad, but I think overall it's been a great thing. What does that partnership look like for you two?
I get to do something I love with the one I love more than anything. And we work 365 days together. We not only film together, we cook together. We sit on the porch together. We enjoy life more than anything else. We never take a day for granted. I never take her love for granted. We wake up and I tell her, I say, remember, sugar, the glass is half full every day. It's never half empty around here. And I said, we'll work hard today and we'll work as long as we can. Then we'll start over tomorrow, good Lord willing. I remember we had done a bunch of videos in July one year. It was hot. I come in the house and she is still in there at the computer editing. I said, it's 11:30, sugar. I said, it's about bedtime, because if we're going to film in the morning in the summer in Oklahoma, we'd start at 5:30 before it got 80 degrees, standing by a fire. And she looked at me and she's looking at the computer and she looked back at me and she said, I'm getting tired of looking at you. And I said, I really don't know how to take that. Do you mean on the computer or here? She said, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a blessing to have, and you know this, it's a blessing to have someone by your side where there's never a wasted step, there's never wasted motion. When
Yeah.
we're at the wagon cooking, we know each other's routine. I taught her that this is what's going to happen. If this is going to take place, if the weather changes, it don't make no difference. We're going to do it. And if I had to walk off and leave that wagon with someone that I trusted that I know would run it the way I want to, it'd be her.
Absolutely. I feel blessed that my wife and I are able to build something,
Yeah.
and work together every day. And you two are doing the exact same thing. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I really
No,
wouldn't.
no, we're on vacation every day.
I'm glad that like our kids get to see us work together and get along and build a plan and then continue to build on that. And I think a lot of folks don't get that opportunity.
No, and it's when it's YouTube too. I mean, doing TV, sure, they'd see me at the airport. They'd say, "Hey, I seen you on this, or I seen you on that."
Yeah,
And that's the only interaction you really had with them. But with YouTube, people are like family. If I don't see them comment in a week or two, I get to thinking something happened to them. You know,
sure.
it's a deal that I told Shen, these people have become our family. I
Yes,
said, they may not be sitting right here eating with us, but I said, they know what we're putting into life. And I said, it's
absolutely.
not just cooking. There's always something in there that's a little more than that. We, as you can see that old flag behind us, it means so much to us. We honor our servicemen and women and veterans all across the world that have kept this old country safe. I got up about 4 years ago, and it was in August. We'd filmed for, I guess, 5 days in a row. And I told her, I said that night before, I said, I'm smoked out, sugar. I said, we're going to take about 3 days off. And she said, I hear you. And I'd get up about 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, and I'd open that laptop computer, and I'd always tried to answer as many comments as I thought I had time for. And the
Sure.
first one that morning was, good morning, Mr. Rollins. This is Lance Corporal Cody Childers. I'm currently stationed in Afghanistan. What we did today wasn't the most pleasant thing in the world, but there was 9 of us gathered around a laptop computer and you made us feel like we were home. Please don't quit what you're doing. You make a difference. I went in there and I woke her up. I said, we got a film today too, sugar. I said, people's counting on it. And I tell people this story not to make them sad.
Yeah.
3 weeks later, I got a call from his mother, said we lost Cody to an IAD. The flag that we flew over his service in Washington, D.C., he wanted you to have.
Oh my
I said,
goodness.
ma'am, I can't take that. And she said, oh, you'll take it. You'll fly it. It's with that Studebaker wagon everywhere it goes, and it is flying in them colors for him and all that have served, that gave it all. You hear that story and you think, that makes me sad. But sometimes, and I tell Shan this a lot, sometimes you never know when you're going to make a difference in someone's life.
That
You
is
may be
true.
the only Jesus that people see that day. So make a difference, know that you can be counted on, and put it out there.
Yep. I totally agree. We don't ever know where people are in life, and we take for granted because a lot of times we don't share those things
That's right.
in these platforms, whether it's YouTube, the TV shows, the whatever you're doing. Being unashamed
Oh, yeah.
to bring that out is huge. I encourage everybody, all of our listeners, to don't suppress it.
No,
Let people know who you are and what you stand for.
we all got branded a long time ago,
Hmm.
and I've seen them old men, and I've done it too, mark many a hide. But if you don't brand it right, then the hair grows over it and you can't see it no more. We've been branded by the love of Jesus. And I said, we can't let it hair over where you can't find it. I said, we need to show it to people. We have so many families that watch. People will tell me, they'll send an email and say, you know, my kids are 4 and 5 years old and they have to watch your videos every night before they go to sleep. And I said, yes, ma'am, them videos will make you sleepy. I promise you. And she said, no, you make them feel comfortable. Ma'am, y'all are family. When you gather around the table, my mother always told me this. It's not the legs that hold it up, it's a family around it. And whether you're just one by yourself or you're in a family of 12, know that we're with you in heart and soul and mind.
I love that. I need to remember that. Tell my own kids that. You have this new series coming out, the Cast Iron Cowboy. Why was now the right time?
We thought of this project 8 years ago. A producer called me from LA, and I used to get a lot of calls from LA, and I'd just say, no, thank you. Y'all are car salesmen. I just hang up the phone. Well, this guy was persistent. He just kept calling back. Shan said, he's done sent like 12 emails. You need to call this guy. And I thought, well, all right, I'll call him. And he said, if you could have a show, what would it be? And that's the number one reason that I thought maybe I can trust this guy,
Yeah.
because the rest of them would say, hey, here's this ideal. This is what you're going to do. And I said, well, Clay, if I could do a show, it would be to honor the American rancher and the American cowboy across the United States, Canada, anywhere that there's a piece of beef sticking out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I hear you. We worked on it off and on together for a long time. Thought we had it sold twice. I remember once it was on the contract. The table was there. The contract was on the table. They were going to sign it the next day, and the Food Network quit.
Oh,
They were
wow.
sold out, bought by someone else, and that thing was gone. Another one had it bought. He said, I've got it. I'll get it signed tomorrow. He called me when I was on the ranch, and he apologized. And he said, Ken, I'm so sorry. And he was crying. I said, hey, don't worry about it. I said, if God didn't mean for it to happen, it ain't going to happen. Well, Clay didn't give up. Me and Shan didn't give up. It was always on sort of on the back burner at times. And then the Outdoor Channel reached out to us, and they said, hey, we have watched a lot of your videos. We really like what y'all got in mind. Would you like to visit? And I just emailed them back, and I said, you'll visit with me and Shannon and Clay. And I said, we'll go from there. They've been great people to work with because they've never said, let's change this or let's do it this way. We know what's in it. Clay has the passion that we do. It's Rabbit Foot Productions. And him and Sam, when we go somewhere, and we spend a lot of time together, and we've filmed the first season, and now we've nearly finished with the second season, they become family. And I miss them when I'm not around them. But this is not about me and Shannon. I wanted it
Sure.
to be about a chuck wagon and history, but also the ranches across America, from the small family owned deals to 750,000 acres. They're still doing it in a way that it started so many years ago. And it's a passion that they have to make sure that they're trying to raise the best beef in the world. And we get lucky to go and see them places to feed their crews. It is a great thing.
What was it like filming at 8 different ranches across the country?
You see a lot of country, and you meet a lot of different personalities. You
Sure.
know, we went in the first season, from feeding a ranch there in Oklahoma that is probably one of the oldest ranches in Oklahoma, nearly 150 years old now, and that's a
Mhm.
Stewart ranch, to doing a bison ranch, and it's totally different. I mean, they're raising beef down here on one hand and raising premier quarter horses, and they're doing it all horseback and cowboy style. And these folks with these bison, it's a totally different ball game when you're raising something that can run over you at any second of the day. To be able to see these places, to be in the Great Basin in Wyoming, the Ruby Mountains in Nevada. We've cooked when it was 101 on the JA Ranch to 3 degrees in Nevada in the winter. But
Man.
if they're working in it, we can cook in it.
Yeah.
And I want to showcase, it's not what you see on TV, some cowboy just riding down the trail. It's a beautiful day. Everything in the world can happen, and it does most of the time.
I bet that's right. Any favorite meals or moments from the first season?
I would say every ranch, every meal, because the joy of what we do is watching people eat it and
Yeah.
seeing the expression on their face from a hard day's work that a crew has put in, and they come to the wagon and they sit down and they eat. It's like my mother told me so many years ago, and I told you this earlier. Cook what you love for the ones you love. Me and Shan are doing that.
What do you hope the folks that are kind of new that are viewing the first season, what do you want them to take away?
I want them to see that this is not a dying breed of people.
Yep.
They're still out there. They're carrying on a legacy, just like if I'm trying to carry on a legacy for being a chuck wagon cook, they're doing the same thing in the way they're raising beef. Whether it be a small little isolated ranch that's 40,000 acres, that's homeschooling kids, that it's 70 miles to the nearest town, to ranches that are just humongous. It's still the same methods.
Absolutely.
We got to put the best feed out there. We've got to take care of the land. We've got to raise these cattle to where we're producing the greatest quantity and quality of beef that we can.
And I feel like a lot of folks misunderstand that yeah, they view us as a dying breed, but at the
Yeah.
same time, cattle industry is very progressive.
Oh, yeah.
I
You
mean,
know, it ain't, it's not like it was so many years ago when old Cookie was going down the trail. You know, at first the railhead took his part away from it.
yep,
And people would say, well, y'all still drive cattle 100 miles? And I said, we may be in a different part of the ranch every 2 or 3 days. Some traps in that ranch may be 18, 19,000 acres. You get through working that country, you go to the next one, you know.
yep.
I said, and when they ship cattle, it's in a big old bull hauler. There comes a set
Mhm.
of pins, you know. There's been a lot of change, and a lot of it has been for the better. There's some things that I don't think has changed that are what I'd call the greatest things in the world, and that's people are still in too big a hurry to me. I mean, sure, there's times when you have to hurry, but I see it so much now on ranches. We all take time to have 3 meals a day. And
Absolutely.
you get in a lot of homes or you go to a restaurant, there's more people holding a cell phone than there is a fork.
There's some friends of mine that still they do everything the traditional way. They got some pretty good country, big country, and I love going with them. Like there's nothing more than when we're dragging out and pulling a set of cows out of some country, and you look out there and it's early in the morning and quiet. You know, like you said, there's nobody's on their cell phone.
Huh.
You're just the man next to you on both sides, and you're going across there. And I think being able to step back and see that, I think folks in the city that have maybe never experienced that, I hope it doesn't ever go away. I hope we're
Oh,
still
yeah.
doing this 100 years from now.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I used to laugh at people on the East Coast or really anywhere. They had really no clue what the raising beef process was, you know.
Yes.
And we were feeding a bunch of steaks as samples at this grocery store chain, and they had us at Long Island one year. This lady said, and National Beef was sponsoring the beef, and this lady come up there and she said, "I only eat grass-fed beef." And I said, "Ma'am," and I like to give people a hard time.
You
I
bet.
said, "Well, ma'am, did you know that it was milk fed first?" "Oh," she said, "I'm lactose intolerant. I can't eat that." And I said, "There you go, ma'am." I said, "You're going to have to eat chicken, I guess." And it's a process. I've been to where I know when that calf hits the ground, I raised cattle for a long number of years to what it takes to get him on the plate.
You
You
bet.
know, when it's something that I admire that them ranchers and them cowboys are still sticking to tradition, but also they've made the necessary changes to make beef better than what it ever has been.
100% agree. And you know, you get those folks that you talk to, and you're kind of misunderstandings on how and what we're doing out
Yeah,
here. You know, there's producers I work with that they're doing feed trials, and instead of the traditional 7 pounds conversion, they're at
yeah,
3.8. I mean, there's some really neat stuff out there that the American
yeah.
consumer has no idea.
Yes, science has come a long way. Technology of not only feeding beef, but really on how to get it to where it really needs to be, you know, when it's finished. And a guy asked me one time, he said, "Have you ever had any vegetarians at the wagon?" And I said, "You didn't know I was a vegetarian?" And he said, "You?" I said, "Yeah, cows eat grass and I eat cows." I said, "I think that counts." And
I love it. Well, you talked about legacy. Let's shift gears. So your cookbooks, I mean, they aren't just recipes. They're full of stories. Why is the storytelling such a big part in your work?
if you think back to ancient civilization, people didn't have a cell phone. If they had a tablet, they was going to have to chisel it out of a piece of stone.
Sure.
Stories were told as a way to communicate, but also to preserve history,
Yep.
to let people know in future generations. They would tell a story to a young child. He could tell that story when he was 80 years old to another child, and it just was like a wave that just kept rolling all the way across. And you have to leave your mark on life, I think,
Absolutely.
to let people know that, hey, this was worth living. I had a guy on an airplane was doing an interview one time. He was a philosophy student fixing to graduate college, and he said, "I've got to interview 12 people. Do you mind if I interview you on this flight?" And I said, "I don't care." I said, "I love to talk to people." He said his first question was, he said, "When you die, what do you want on your headstone?" And I looked at him and I said, "Nothing." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Don't go through life having people have to read something that you might have done or when you were born. Show them what you did while you was alive. They'll remember you." An old man on a ranch told me one time, he said, "You know, people read a lot of stories." He said, "We don't want to be the people reading them. We want to be what the story's about."
Oh man, that's deep right there. You build this career. There's obviously been a shift at some point where when did you realize that this is more, I mean, it was a calling. There's a bigger thing here. I mean, you weren't chasing the money. You weren't chasing the career or trying to build it at that point. Like there is a bigger meaning, kind of what we're talking about right here.
And it's something that I often look back on and think, I'll tell Shan, I'll say, number one, do you have poor vision? Is that why you married me? And I said, number two, I said, I never thought it would get to this.
Yeah.
I said, I look back at it nearly every day and I think I'm making $40 a day in a teepee, cooking for cowboys, to now being able to sometimes just stay at home and make a YouTube video that's worth 10 times that much. And it's something that I'll never give up. She asked me, she said, when are you going to quit cooking? I said, I'm going to cater my own funeral. She said, how you figure? I said, good Lord will let me know if it's close. I said, you don't charge them nothing to get in church. But I said, you can charge them $500 a plate to get out. Lock the doors, don't make them pay. I said, it's the best life insurance policy you'll ever have. Because I don't know when, Jonathon, if this is true for everybody, but I've seen so many old timers that retired and quit and wasn't busy and they died
Yeah.
because they wasn't active. I can still cook in anything. I don't like 117 degrees. I've had a heat stroke and frostbite both, and I'd rather have frostbite any day of the week. But I don't know, it never ceases to amaze me. And I think the thing that really keeps me driven to know that, hey, we're going to try to do a better job tomorrow. I'm going to try to learn something new tomorrow, is the feedback we get from our fans.
You bet.
It's a guy just 3 nights ago made a comment on YouTube. He said, my dad died tonight, but he said, I'm doing something that me and him did together for the last 10 years, and that was watch one of your videos. He said, you're what's going to get me through this. And I told him, I said, no, sir. I said, that's God. I said, God give us a talent. We're just trying to share it with folks. I said, I'm glad we can help. But when you hear those people's stories, it touches your heart. If it don't, something's wrong with you. And then you think, these people are relying on me and Shannon, not just food. I would say 70% of the people that watch our YouTube videos, they're probably not cooking.
You bet.
They want to hear what's going on. They want to see me dance. They want to see the dogs, So
In a way, you're kind of serving as a therapist in a way.
Yeah, there was a guy told me that the other day. He said, you're a therapist. And I said, I have no degree in anything in my life except went to the school of hard knocks. I said, I have a PhD. I said, that's post-hole digger. And I said, that's it. And he said, no. He said, you and Shan have a message. Yeah. And he said, y'all aren't afraid to put it out there. And he said, people need to learn, don't lean on what's comfortable all your life. You'll fall down.
Sure.
He said, step out.
Well, I mean, with all of this kind of blowing up, and you're a very humble man, and I appreciate that about you. And I know that's why your fans, that's why they're drawn to you. I think a big portion of that. I mean, you've cooked for thousands. You've been on national TV, written bestsellers. What keeps you grounded?
I'd say God and of the best woman ever, and the rest of it would be fans. Simple pleasures for me happen every day. I can sit here on the back porch now. We look right into the White Mountain wilderness. Shan said, it don't take a whole lot to make you happy, does it? I said, the love of a good woman, 3 or 4 good dogs, and I said a cup of coffee and a can of snuff, and I said, I can probably be 180 years old.
Honestly, I think as we age, I think it gets to where it's less about things and it's more about the experience.
It's something, it goes back to when my dad had taught me about, picking out a horse. He'd say, you and your brother are pretty gifted in life. Y'all can walk into a pen of 50 horses and pick 2 out pretty quick that are going to make good ones. He said, you know why you do that, right? I said, yeah, you always taught us to look for a soft eye. Mm-hmm. I said, a soft eye always works in horses, but I said it works even better with people, children, and dogs. And I said, I've had the blessing of knowing that I've had some really good horses in life. I've had some really good dogs, and I got the best wife ever.
Absolutely. I love it. What's something about your journey that you hope the next generation of ranchers, cooks, or dreamers hear loud and clear from you?
Don't give up on an opportunity just because you can't throw a saddle on it. Don't think it's too tall or it's too rank. Reach way back and just take a hold of it and say, I'm going to give it all I got today. And if the good Lord blesses it, and if He wants you to do it, you'll still be there tomorrow, and it'll get easier every trip. But don't forget to watch that premiere September 29th on the Outdoor Channel. We want to showcase American ranching, American beef, and the American cowboy.
Kent, our listeners, where can they find you at?
They can just go to our website, just kentrollins.com, or anything, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, everything in the world is just Cowboy Kent Rollins. We do have quite a few products available at Atwood's Farm and Ranch stores if people go into them. But we have a big online store too. And just y'all keep telling us that we're doing a good job, and we'll keep trying.
Listeners, I got to tell you, you go down this rabbit trail and you're probably going to binge a lot of Kent's videos, and there's going to be some things you're going to want to try to cook. I don't know how Kent makes it look so good, but he does.
Life is simple and food is simple. I'm not going to complicate it.
That's right. Well, Kent, thank you for sharing your stories, your wisdom.
Thank you, my friend.
And your fire with us today. I mean, your life's work is a testament to what happens when you honor, where you came from. You never forgot about that. And you're not afraid, to bring that into the world that we live in today. And I think that really resonates with all of your followers and everybody that stumbles across you. Check out Kent's new series, The Cast Iron Cowboy, September 29th. It's coming out. So be sure and get that on there. And if today lit a fire under you, good. That was the point. Be good or be good at it.
That's right.